All right. Welcome back, everybody, to our latest episode of The Nest. We had a very eventful week, including some big news in the NFL. The Celtics continuing their strong play with a pair of wins in California, 3 Bruins games, and the Red Sox now getting ready for the 2022 regular season. And joining me for today's episode are Anirban Chakraborty and Rohan Venkatesh. How are you guys doing?
To be here as always. Spring is here. Well, spring is almost here, and baseball is back. Can't be sad about that. So it's good to see the Red Sox off to a great start over there. So always good to see that. So anyway, yeah, good. Glad to have all you on here, and it's good as always.
Yeah, thanks for having us. A lot to talk about.
Yeah. So, the big news, obviously, we teased it. We actually didn't know about this at the time, but Tom Brady is back. After 40 days of retirement, he is going to be back with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So let's just talk about that first. Obviously, I'll just start with this. I never understood why he even retired to begin with. He had an outstanding 2021 season, and I think there was some tension between him and the Buccaneers, but clearly they were able to work it out, and now he's back, and Tampa should once again be the favorite to win the Super Bowl, I think, right? They have a loaded team.
Well, they
added Russell Gage, Logan Ryan on their defense, and Russell Gage on offense, another wide receiver. So, this should be a very good team again in 2022.
Yeah, it's good. Tampa Bay is definitely going to be a competitive team because what was funny to see was that the moment Brady announced his retirement, basically Tampa's odds of winning, they just plummeted, and now they're way back up. So I guess for anyone who mistimed their wagering moves for next season, I guess they're really regretting it the other day. I guess people who came out on the other side of that trade are thinking, wow, I'm a genius right now. So I guess people got played on both ends, but at the end of the day, I think that this is the way I kind of see it is that Brady first he says he's retiring. Then we hear, okay, then it's not, then we hear, oh, it's not official. He hasn't said anything yet. Then he says he's retiring. So it's like, okay, so then was the announcement premature then? And then that's what we thought at the time. And then, okay, we think, okay, for a little while, okay, he's retired. And all of a sudden he's unretiring. So to me, he never really retired in the first place. This is all just an emotional roller coaster, and I can't help but think that some of it is a publicity stunt.
I think it's a little bit more than just publicity. Obviously he does want the attention. I'm sure about that. But I think for him, there was genuine friction between him and the Buccaneers organization. I think he wanted to potentially leave Tampa this offseason and play elsewhere, but he wasn't allowed out of his contract with the Buccaneers. So I guess this was kind of his way of sort of trying to see if he can have some power play situation where he would retire and then he'd probably come back in August or so and then force the Buccaneers to trade him. We heard San Francisco 49ers has a potential destination, but I guess I don't know what entirely happened, but I guess they were able to work it out. We saw those pictures, or I guess the video with him meeting Cristiano Ronaldo, and the significance there is Ronaldo plays for Manchester United, and with Jay Glazer, sorry, not Jay Glazer, that's a Fox analyst, but the Glazers, they own the Buccaneers in addition to owning Manchester United. So he met with them in England, and I guess that's where they were able to sort that out. And I guess they were able to come to some agreement. It's good for the league. I think obviously Brady's still he's able to play at a high level. So I think for a person like him, he should pretty much play as long as he wants. And I always felt like a guy like Brady, right? I think he just wanted to keep playing until he no longer could play. I don't think he was ever satisfied with any of this, right? Because if anything,
it's better to retire when you're good than to wait until you start to it's better to retire when you're good rather than keep on playing until you start to suck. So
potentially, yeah, but I think yes and no, right? I think it depends on how many more years he thinks he can be a high quality quarterback in this league.
He wasn't even close to that. It would have been one thing if we felt that, okay, he's in the twilight of his career, he's not as good as he used to be, but he had an excellent season last year, and he was one of the best QBs, if not the best QB in the game last year by several measures. So if he were any other age, we would have said he has a long career left. The only reason for him to retire at this point would be age, but that doesn't seem to be stopping him. So, hey, more power to him.
Yeah, I guess it's Well, in response to the first question about their Super Bowl contenders, I mean, yeah, they're gonna be pretty, they're gonna be good again. But I think as we might get to later, I think there are just a ton of teams that look like they're gonna be really good on paper this season. So we'll see what happens there. I mean, we forget, right? Last season, Matt Stafford and the Rams knocked him out, and this year they already got Allen Robinson, and they're looking to build on build on their offense even more. So I mean, obviously with Tom Brady, the Buccaneers suddenly become a team that can go into the playoffs, but I think it's too early to really call them favorites. I mean, just there's just so many good teams.
I
In
mean, within the
response,
NFC though, right? It's just
well,
Green
that's okay.
Bay,
Yeah,
LA, and Tampa.
NFC in my book is the main, like on paper, barring some other offseason moves, it's really the Rams and the Buccaneers. And then what I'm saying though is that on the side of the AFC, you just have, I think the AFC is going to be really really entertaining, and I think the teams there are just absolutely firepowered. So I think it's honestly, I think it's too early to call anyone favorites. I think there's like probably 8 teams I can see making the Super Bowl in total. But yeah, Rohan, what are you saying?
For the Buccaneers, their odds of winning the NFC Championship should be pretty good because now the NFC doesn't have Russell Wilson anymore. So that's gonna be something for the AFC to handle. So because that like the only other, I mean the other major the other major contender I can think of in the NFC East, I mean sorry, the NFC overall would probably be the Packers. And we know that since Aaron Rodgers is
What
staying
about the
over there,
Rams?
Oh,
the
the
Rams
Rams,
also
right?
Rams are gonna be like are gonna be are always gonna be contenders as well. But you gotta take the Packers seriously, even though they do end up disappointing in the playoffs, which has kind of been like a tradition recently, where the Packers they get this far and then they end up disappointing in the playoffs. But
I mean, the
but Aaron
Packers
Rodgers,
also traded away Devontae Adams too, right? Their
but
best
but
wide receiver.
but the Packers they got something proven and Aaron Rodgers, yeah, he potentially wanted to leave. He may not be back on the best of terms, but he is back and it is what it is. So they are going to be contenders as well. But the fact that Russell Wilson is gone, that is a massive shakeup to the NFC, and the fact that he's on the Broncos right now, it adds it improves the Broncos' chances in the AFC. So the AFC is going to get a little bit tougher at this point. So that's kind of just how I see it at this point.
Yeah, and on it, just going forward, I mean, really the Rams, honestly the main knock is that they just won the Super Bowl, and we all know that the year after can be really interesting. Like some teams respond well, others just never reach those heights again. But again, like if we're looking on paper, it's really the Buccaneers, the Rams, and then talent-wise, I guess you have to put the Cowboys in there, though they've also had their own share of woes when it comes to really doing much in the playoffs past the divisional round. So I think, again, so I think in response to that question, I don't think it necessarily makes them favorites; it just makes them contenders. But in response to the second point, I think it is really interesting because I know you and I were talking about this a lot, kind of in the week leading up to it, Amartya, but on one hand, it's definitely, I think he definitely, for all of his thinking about the retirement process and talking to his family and friends, I'm sure he didn't actually anticipate what it would finally be like to really just never play again and just suddenly be out of the news cycle, out of the discussion. I definitely agree with Rohan that there is a fair amount of branding going on here. We know that Tom Brady is one of the savviest athletes in marketing. I mean, we think about LeBron James and NBA and how like savvy he is when it comes to marketing and patents and stuff. Tom Brady's the equivalent in terms of marketing prowess in the league, right? I mean, we know about the TB12. I think he like invests in a bunch of other startups. He has this huge relation with crypto going on. Funnily enough, he offered to donate a crypto or something in response to the fan who basically paid $500,000 for what will not be his last touchdown pass in a meaningless playoff game. So my heart goes out to that guy or
Yeah,
to
whoever
whoever it
bought that
was.
whoever bought that
Um,
football and got
that's
ripped
why
off.
that's why you only buy that stuff 2 or 3 years after, I guess, is the moral of the story. But again, I
For
do
the
kind
record,
of
I paid $20 for Tom Brady's retirement commemorative from Sports Illustrated, which should be
right.
arriving at some point. But I'm okay with that because I got the Patriots edition of that. And anyways, his Patriots career is likely over, though you never know with this person, like how it's going to end. So
He could always sign a 1-day contract.
yeah, but
He
I
could,
mean,
I don't
Although
think he
although I
will.
doubt
He will.
although
He will
although,
not.
although I doubt that though. Although I doubt
I'd
that
be
though
very
because
surprised.
I still think there's probably some bad blood
yeah, but
between
in
him and
all
Belichick.
effect, his career with the Patriots is over. I mean, his NFL career is still going on, but not his career with the Patriots.
Yeah, in fact, just a few days ago, we like officially marked the 2-year anniversary that Brady officially left us.
Right. So, all these things are coming to a head. I do personally think that there's some degree of that going on. Like it's really hard for me to believe that Tom's just spent the whole season talking to his friends and family, like made this huge decision, and then just suddenly 40 days later he's like, "Oh, okay, never mind guys, I'm back." And honestly, like part of it is I think it's one of those things again where I really feel like, and obviously, like Amartya said, the main thing he cares about, he's a competitor. He wants to keep playing if he can. He probably would have kept playing. I think at the end of the day, it was more like discussions with his wife and his family about, like how that interacts with his playing. But
I don't
but it
think that was
definitely,
it, because if it was really a family related issue, he would still be retired, right? I don't
if
think he
it,
would come
it
back.
there's,
Well, I mean,
well,
there's
look,
also,
that's
I
the
mean,
only
I'm only
reason,
speculating at this point,
whatever.
but there's always a
Yeah.
possibility that there's always the possibility that his family probably didn't want him to keep on going, like keep on playing.
Yeah,
There's a
but
good
wouldn't
reason
that
for
be
that
more? But if
because
that was the case, wouldn't he have like a
but
conversation with them
but
and
Well,
then
in
but
that
but
case,
decide
there's
maybe
no
but
other.
later?
maybe
That's the
but
only.
maybe
There's no
but
other reason
maybe
he'd retire.
but maybe he somehow convinced his family to let him keep playing. Who knows? I mean, who knows what the internal
I
Yeah,
don't
dynamics
yeah.
think
It's
are?
all.
so.
You're right. It's all speculation at this point. But what I'll say to Marty is that when you listen to him himself, like he himself didn't never really communicate a desire that he himself was making a decision like just him in mind to hang up his boots. If you look at his retirement post too, a lot of it like and as well as like a lot of his comments at the end of the season did revolve around the discussions he had with his family, with his wife Giselle. So I do want to say like I do think that's relevant, but again I do think it's kind of unfortunate in the sense that the media kind of and really fans, to be honest, invested a lot of kind of pathos, a lot of emotion in kind of giving him this nice send off for his first retirement. We all made tributes, we all talked about how important he was. I spent 15 minutes talking to my parents about, and they're not even like that huge into football, just like talking about Tom Brady and how much he meant to New England, just for one thing. And honestly, I feel like that's just kind of his loss at this point, because when he retires for real next time, it's just like no one's gonna care. Like if anyone thinks he's gonna get like a 10-page Sports
Well,
Illustrated magazine the
well, I
second
mean,
time, they're kidding
MJ
themselves.
did it. MJ retired and then he unretired and came back, and when he retired for good, he still got a good amount of attention after that.
I mean, I think this one's a little different though
And Michael
because
Jordan, by the way, retired twice and came back out of retirement twice. So he actually
all right. So
retired
are you
three
are you telling me?
times.
I don't know if I don't actually remember Michael Jordan, so I could be wrong. But
Michael Jordan
did he get
retired
like the same
once.
like did he get what do you say he got the same intensity of a retirement like commemoration each of those times? I
The
don't
first
I
time
don't
he
remember in
retired,
general,
it was
but
after he had just won his first like three championships. He retired then for like a season, and then he came back, and then they
well that
won
was to go
another
play
three
baseball, right?
championships.
Was that to
Yeah,
go
I
play
mean, there
baseball?
was also some speculation about what was actually going on, but basically, yeah, he came back from that first retirement, won another three championships, then retired again with the Chicago Bulls, and then he came out of retirement and played for the Washington Wizards again, and then he finally retired for good at age 40, I think. But I mean, that's the thing, right? Like after you retire once or twice, people just won't really believe it until they see it, right? I mean, now that's the case with Brady. From the whole get-go, we all kind of knew that he was like very kind of like he was very hesitant to make the decision, because when you listen to him talk to Jim Gray and Jim Gray asked him, he said never say never. So clearly it was on his mind at that point. If he really was committed to retiring, he would have said, no, I'm done with it. I'm done playing. But he didn't say that. He left the door open. So it already showed us that he was
But
already
it's still
hesitant.
crying wolf at the end of the day. If you cry wolf, you can only cry wolf once.
Yeah,
If you cry
exactly.
wolf,
So I don't believe it now. Like now, no one's going to believe it until it actually happens, where he actually doesn't play at the start of a season. And even then, people aren't going to believe it, right? The only way we'll ever fully believe it is when he gets inducted into the Hall of Fame, and then he's no longer allowed to play. That's the only way we'll ever be able to believe it.
imagine he's like about to go to the Hall of Fame and then he announces he's coming back again. Like,
Yeah, I mean, we have to wait 5 years for that, right? So, I mean, there was a whole Hall of Fame commemoration where they said he would be eligible in 2027. Like, at this point, who knows? Like, it could be 2030 by the time he actually gets inducted. So, I mean, at this point, I'm just sort of like, I'm happy that he's back, but I just never understood why he did it initially, because I don't buy the whole family thing. I don't. I'm sorry. If that was really the reason, he would still be retired. I don't think it was just simply him talking to his wife and talking with his kids and like trying to come up with this. My hunch, and based on sort of reading, and there's a lot of speculation, I admit, but I do believe that this is probably more along the lines of what actually happened. He was unhappy with Bruce Arians in Tampa. I have a feeling about that. And because of that, he wanted Bruce Arians gone. And if not, he wanted to leave Tampa. But Tampa said, no, if you are to play in the NFL still next year, it's going to be with us. So I think Brady was that unhappy initially that he was like, okay, yeah, I'm just going to step aside and retire. And Tampa, to their credit, was like, okay, yeah, go ahead. But if you ever do change your mind, we're still here, by the way. I mean, if you listen to how this sort of played out, I think that's kind of along the lines, right? Like him going to England to try to meet not Jay Glazer. I'm sorry, I keep mixing them up. The Glazer family. And I mean, if you think about that, isn't that kind of like a little bit of a sneaky way of doing that, flying to England to meet with the owner rather than meeting in Florida? Like, isn't that kind of like a way of sort of like trying to hide some?
Well, it's a great way to upstage your boss.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's sort of along the lines of what happened. I think Tampa and him reached some middle line at the end of the day. They met in the middle into some agreements about how next season's going to go. And maybe, I mean, at this point, I think he should just keep playing until he can't play anymore. A guy like him, he's clearly not satisfied with just winning Super Bowls, right? Because if he was, he probably would have retired like 4 or 5 years ago. He isn't.
Leverage, and he knows he has leverage. That's why he was able to go talk to the owner. And Brady's also politically savvy. He knows the internal dynamics and workings of the team. So he knows how he knows how to work the system, and that's exactly what he did. At least that's a very strong feeling that I get. Family could have been a component of it, but there are many possible reasons. But overall I do still think that it does sour the moment that he does actually end up retiring for real.
Oh, definitely. That's why I don't understand why he did it now. Like, I don't know why he decided to retire to begin with. I don't have an issue with him playing.
Because it's bad for his legacy. Because
I wouldn't say it's bad for his legacy, right? Like his legacy is like already pretty much cemented. But I will say it is bad for like when his actual retirement does happen, because everyone has already given their tribute to him, right? And everyone has already done that. They're not going to do it with the same amount of intensity. Like when he actually does retire, it's just going to be like, oh, haha, we'll actually have to see now if he actually does retire, because look, he already came out of retirement once. He can do it again, right? Like that's going to be the unfortunate situation, which should have never happened.
Gronk did it. So
yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, I mean, when Brett Favre did it, like by the end of the time, it was like kind of like a joke. Like, is he going to come back? Is he not going to come back? Like, come on, like people are just going to stop paying attention then at that point. So like, I mean, I just don't think he should have retired to begin with. I mean, so that's my main gripe with the whole situation. He never should have retired. He should just keep playing until he can't play anymore. That's clearly how a guy like him works, right? These types of superstars, and like really it's hard to relate to them because they're not just star athletes. This is like the top of the top performers.
One thing I can say about Tom Brady, now is that even though once his career as a football player is over, he definitely has another career waiting for him as a soap opera star.
Yeah, I mean,
well,
he can move to
a movie
LA
in the works,
then.
right? Documentary in the works. So I guess they'll continue as he enters his season. So yeah, I mean,
him and Bill
like I
Belichick
said, he probably
can collaborate on a soap opera then. That would be good material.
Sure.
Well, he did want to go to Miami. I don't know if you guys heard, but there is I know a Boston Globe writer. It might have been who was it? Or no, it was Boston Globe journalist Ben Volen actually talked about how apparently Tom Brady wanted to go to the Miami Dolphins with Sean Payton after retiring. So, I guess the idea here is that he's not really content to win in the NFC. He wants to go to the Patriots' own division and put us in the muds while going to the playoffs, I guess. So, it's interesting because I definitely feel like there is a certain group of Patriots fan base. I think, again, I've said this before. I don't think it's mutually incompatible to appreciate all he's done for us over 2 decades and at the same time be like, okay, well, now you're on another team. I'm still a Patriots fan. I'm going to cheer for us and you do your own thing. I kind of feel like that's what's happening here. And especially once you see, because as you mentioned, Amartya, we don't know anymore how long he's going to be here. All right. I'm not kidding. We could be here 3 years later and we could still be around. I don't know. It all really depends on his fitness, but if he's healthy in 3 years, I'm like, if you're playing at this age, like they're playing at 3 years isn't too much different when it comes to like the kind of personal, like professional life thing. So what I'm saying is, give him 5 years or so where he's still playing in the league at a high level. Like again,
you're talking like when he's like 49 or like even like 50, like at that age.
No one said he. I mean, there are very few people who at his current age have been playing at that level. But my point is, as you get further and further away, I think it's again it becomes more and more of that thing where, I'm a Patriots fan. You were with us for one part of your career. Now you're with another part of your career. Like, good luck with everything. Have a good life. That's really kind of what it turns into. I'm not sure there's quite an analogy for it. Like, maybe if Peyton Manning was like really good at in Denver for like 6, 7 years. Or you could even say Adam Vinatieri, right? He won Super Bowls with us. Then he went to the
A
Colts
lot
and
of
was
these
there for
players,
a long time.
they faded
Well,
near the end
Adam
of their
Vinatieri
careers.
was quite good until probably until like last. Well, honestly, I mean, obviously kicker position is different, but he had played into his 40s. He was still quite an elite kicker in the latter part of his career with the Colts. So I feel like he's kind of an example of that, like someone who who won us the Super Bowl. Let's not forget he kicked that game-winning field goal, and then he spent a huge portion of his career with the Colts, right? So it ended up being the thing where we appreciate you, we appreciate what you did. Now you're on another team. Good luck to you. And
There's
that's
also
honestly how I
yeah.
personally feel about Tom Brady at the moment. And I think you're going to see more and more people shifting to that camp over the years.
But there's also the possibility that Brady might have been initially sincere when he retired, and then once he actually did make the decision to retire, maybe he had that oh no moment. I've been doing this my entire career, and this is the only thing I've done. This is the only thing I know. Now what? He might
Look,
have he might have had that kind of
anything is
moment.
possible. What you're saying, Rohan. I think that's totally valid too. Like I think it's one of those things where like we're all gonna guess, we're all gonna have our own theories. I think we have 3 different theories, 4 different theories circulating in this Zoom on why he left. None of us are ever gonna know. It might be a mix of all these things. Might be one of them. But bottom line, he's gonna be back. And like I said, once again this
Or is
season, I'm
he?
rooting.
Stay
All right,
tuned for the
if he
next
unretires
edition.
again, then I'm just I don't know. All I'm
He
saying is this
retires
season,
today, and then he comes back out of retirement in May.
yeah, this season, all I'm saying is I'm a Patriots fan, and from that perspective, I will
Hey,
not
let's
be cheering
talk
for the
about that a little bit
Buccaneers.
now. Like the Patriots, like what is going on with that team? Because it's a little concerning to see like sort of everything that's happened, right? They traded 2 offensive linemen, Shaq Mason and Ted Karras has gone to Cincinnati. Shaq Mason was actually traded to Tampa Bay. So it's a little concerning now to sort of see like JC Jackson gone to the Los Angeles Chargers. That is huge news for the Patriots, losing JC Jackson. So
Well, we
I'm a
kind of
little
already knew that he
concerned.
was unhappy. We kind of already
Yeah.
knew that, so it doesn't
Yeah,
really
but
come
it's
as much of a
concerning now,
surprise.
right? Because now your best cornerback, and we already talked about how defense was important to improve, and their defense has gotten worse. Their offense now has gotten worse because you lose 2 starting offensive linemen. So they haven't really done anything to update or upgrade at their wide receiver position either. So I'm a little concerned at this point about like kind of how it's going to go next year because the Raiders just acquired Devontae Adams and they are loading up and the Chargers got Khalil Mack, and they upgraded. I think they just upgraded on defense, right, overall. And then the Raiders also signed Chandler Jones. So the whole AFC West division now, you can make a case that all 4 teams next year make the playoffs. So if that's what's going to be happening, the Patriots would be missing out. The Patriots were kind of falling behind now, like in the depth chart overall, and that's kind of concerning to me about like what's sort of happening, right? Because Buffalo at this point is a better team in the division. So you have to probably look into the wild card situation. But the wild card is going to be so competitive. So I'm a little nervous about what's sort of going on now. I hope that they can rectify some of this in the draft, but it's not looking great at this point. Like I don't really know what else to really say at this point. It's been kind of disappointing to sort of see like the moves they made. Like I don't care about the most splashy moves, but I mean Allen Robinson would have been a nice receiver to have, and they didn't get him. The Rams got him, and they haven't really done anything to update the defense at this point either. So yeah, I don't know. I'm a little nervous about the Patriots, but I am curious to hear what you guys think. Are we like sort of, is there still room to like kind of improve before the start of the season? Obviously there is, but should we be
If you're
hitting the panic button now?
Well, I mean, if you're losing offensive line, that's bad. It's not necessarily the end of the world. It's just that it's going to mean that Mac Jones is going to have to play under a lot more pressure. We'll have to see if he rises to the occasion or not. Anyway, we do have the new offensive coach coming in, so we'll have to see how they navigate that situation.
Yeah, I know this is another thing we talk about as well. I was actually also really interested in Allen Robinson coming to the Patriots, and at this point, it looks like really most of the kind of elite wide receivers on the market have either re-signed with their teams, like Chris Godwin or like Juju Smith-Schuster, or Allen Robinson have moved on. But again, I think when we talk about what the biggest needs of this team are, I think you said it yourself, right? We needed defensive kind of a renewal. We needed cornerback, new linebackers. that kind of positions. So when you look at it from the Patriots' perspective of rebuilding, it really doesn't make sense to invest most of your capital in an elite wide receiver when you have other holes, like absolutely gaping holes, right? And we can say what we want about how Kendrick Bourne's not going to be Cooper Kupp or Jacoby Myers won't be Cooper Kupp, but at the end of the day, with the current try we have the sixth highest scoring offense last season. We and it's passable, right? It's our receiving core is not really the biggest thing we need to look at in this offseason. Like you said yourself, it's going to be the defense. And yeah, I think we already kind of recruited Terrence Mitchell to our team, but he's not really, like you said, in the JC Jackson territory. So I'm guessing that we're going to be looking really heavily into the first round draft this season. For example, Andrew Booth Jr. from Clemson is probably the top rated cornerback in the draft. So I'm sure we'll be targeting him. But there's a good amount of cornerbacks and actually a good amount of wide receivers as well available. I'm thinking this is going to be a year where we're going to see Belichick really using the draft and trying to build up an offense through there. And regarding kind of the O line, um, that was definitely a little curious, like why we let Shaq Mason go to the Buccaneers. I heard it's because they really want to fill in his position with Mike Onwenu. But again, that's going to be something that we're gonna probably that's going to be something we're going to recruit in the offseason for. It's at this point, I don't think we can really expect any big name experienced players coming to the Patriots because most of them already moved somewhere else.
What about
But
Odell
that's
Beckham Jr.? Would you sign him?
I mean, it depends on, it really depends on the finances. Like we have by most estimates I've read, we have around like 11 million in salary cap. And of course, we all know there's a lot of maneuvers you can do with bonuses and restructuring contracts to really make that draw out as long as possible. But again, like I said, our priority, like I will not be happy with this offseason if we splurge on Odell and just are not able to sufficiently replace a cornerback and linebacker. All right, that is not a good window as far as I'm concerned. I'm much happier if we can get a really talented cornerback in the draft, maybe recruit a few kind of experienced players to play in depth positions in linebacker or O line, and maybe we just continue with the wide receivers we have. Wide receiver is not our priority in this offseason as far as I'm concerned. And meanwhile, I think we have some younger players in linebacker like Josh Utch, for example. We didn't see a lot of him last season. He's only 23, 24. I'm guessing we're going to see him, for example, get a chance this season. So honestly, if you're going to ask me who they're going to sign, I don't know because I think it's going to be. I think they're really going to use the draft to their advantage this year. And like I said, I don't see at this point any big moves coming here. I don't think Bill Belichick's going to sign Odell because I don't think it fits the needs for this team right now. And I know Robert Kraft actually commented on how Belichick actually likes to laugh at teams that win the offseason by spending a ton of money to get experienced players and then not really do too well in the actual season. So, that's kind of, I guess.
Wait, he said that, but last year the Patriots spent like $200 million in free agency. So I don't know why he would
They
say
did,
that.
but I think his
But
point
sure,
was
what do you mean
like,
by winning the offseason? It doesn't really mean anything unless you win in the season.
no,
Yeah, like the
that was a
Rams, I would
joke.
argue won in the
That was a
offseason,
joke.
and they actually
Case in
won
point.
the season.
Case in point. I mean, I know it's another sport over here, but the prime example I'd have to point to for winning the quote unquote winning the offseason would have to be the 2011 Red Sox. And we all know how that
Oh
turned
Lord,
out.
was that Carl Crawford's year?
Yeah, Adrian
Oh, Carl
Gonzalez.
Crawford,
Yep,
Jake Peavy,
yep.
Eric Gagne. No,
But not
Gagne was
Jake Peavy.
07.
No, Eric Gagne was well before. Jake Peavy was in 2013.
No, but
Different sport.
Crawford
Different
was
sport.
there.
Okay, yeah. Point taken. Yeah, I mean, winning the offseason though, it's just doesn't really mean anything. Yeah, that's the point.
No, that was the point of the quote. Yeah, but what I'm saying is again, yeah, I think at this point we just have to be realistic, and that's what we're gonna see. Like we were not ever in the
Realistic. So
discussion.
does that mean like this is not going to even be a playoff team next year? Because let's just be
No,
real.
I'm talking about realistic about off season, right? I'm talking about realistic about the off season, because what I'm saying is that you look at like kind of the big stars like J.C. Jackson. We were not at the end of the day, we just weren't going to keep him because he was
You could have
demanding
given
too
him a
much.
franchise tag and at least traded him and gotten like a second round pick or a first round pick for him, right? Couldn't you have done that?
I don't remember why. I think there was some reason why that didn't work. I think he wanted a franchise tag, but I mean, look, like if if it's what we believe, then I'm sure there must have been some like fine print that we're not aware of. Because if it was as easy as just to slap on a franchise tag and trade him for a first round pick, like no one would ever not do that. So there has to be something going on there that we need to learn more about. But one thing I did actually hear recently, I know, is that Bill Belichick's kind of interested in switching at some point to more of a zone type defense coverage as opposed to man exclusively, because, well, not exclusively, but we know that the Patriots have long used man-to-man coverage, which is why we've needed elite cornerbacks, because you can't really do a man-to-man coverage if you don't have good cornerbacks. But if we're relying more on a zone type coverage going forward, then that allows us to really get by with more of a average to like slightly above average defensive core. And I think that's what we're going to be seeing this season. So yeah, I want to talk. So let's hear your opinion, Amartya, on other teams, for example, like the Broncos or the Bills, for example.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like, some of these teams, like, I mean, just there's 7 playoff spots, right, in the AFC, and I'm not going to give a seeding right now. I don't want to do that, but just off the top of my head, I mean, the Bills are better than the Patriots, right? They should be a playoff team next year. Everyone agrees with that. Kansas City Chiefs, right, playoff team.
I mean, I very likely have the Bills winning it all next year. Very likely.
Okay, but anyways, like, I mean, besides that, like, we're not going into predictions right now, but my point is, what I'm trying to really say is the teams that are better than the Patriots in terms of.
But if that's my take, I think it's pretty safe to say that they at least make the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly. So, but okay, yeah. So, I mean, I'm just saying, like, this is not going to be a seeding thing. I'm not saying that these are like the seedings or the what's going on, but okay. Buffalo Bills, Kansas City Chiefs, Cincinnati Bengals. We're already at 3 teams, right? And then someone from the AFC South has to win that division, right? So there's 4. So now there's 3 wild card spots, right? So there are 4 ways the Patriots can make the playoffs, either through any of the 3 wild card spots or they win the division. So, okay, so now there's 3 wild card spots. So now you have to look at it like this, right? So the Raiders got better at wide receiver, and they've also updated or upgraded at their defense overall too. The Chargers, the Cleveland Browns, who acquired Deshaun Watson. The Patriots are kind of in that mix now. They're probably below, or they're kind of in the running with maybe the Raiders and the Chargers still. So now you're really kind of competing with 3 or 4 teams to even get into the playoffs, which is kind of concerning. And that's also not counting the Indianapolis Colts or like, I guess if they resolve their quarterback situation. But like, I don't know, like we're already looking at a team that's kind of like, if we were honest right now, they'd be out of the playoffs if everything kind of goes like the way we sort of expect, right? Even Baltimore Ravens, right? Lamar Jackson healthy, and if he's back next year fully healthy, then that's going to be a team that can also give the Patriots competition for a playoff spot. So what I'm really trying to get at is there's probably like 9 or 10 teams, and the Patriots are probably in that 8 or 9 mix right now. And they're really going to be trying to get that 6 or 7 wild card spot again. It's not even a given anymore. That's how like sort of the situation has been. So that's where I'm kind of concerned.
They're just about mediocre at this point, and
yeah, exactly. They are mediocre.
I'm in the camp of saying that being mediocre is worse than sucking.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think,
at least if you suck, that you can rebuild.
Well, in football, it's a little different, right? Because I mean, if you're like tanking for like the 1 seed, I mean, really the only time it's really even worth tanking in the NFL is if there's like some franchise legendary quarterback from college, like Trevor Lawrence, Peyton Manning back in the day, Andrew Luck. Those are instances where it's probably okay to tank. The Patriots already have the quarterback situation sort of resolved, right? We all sort of agree that Mac Jones can be the answer. So at this point, is it really even worth? I don't think tanking is even an option, right? Like I don't even want to talk about that because that's clearly not something Bill Belichick is interested in, right? I mean, that's not really the point.
Well, maybe we should start having a conversation about Bill Belichick then.
Oh, interesting. So what are you proposing then?
Start shopping around for coaches.
Well,
I'm not
Tom
saying
Brady, Tom wanted
I'm not
to
saying
apparently get Bill O'Brien. So
okay, let's talk about this a little bit then.
Yeah,
I didn't expect this conversation, but this is good. Okay, so Rohan,
I'm not saying
that you want to move on from Bill Belichick.
I'm not saying I have a replacement in mind, but we shouldn't just take it for granted that Bill Belichick is the end all be all and he's going to be the path forward. Because yeah, he's had his time. He's contributed a lot to the Patriots championships, but he does also carry a lot of that baggage around him. And he's a lot of the reason that the rest of the country pretty much hates the Patriots. That aside, though,
I mean, that doesn't really matter, right? Like when you win a lot, then people are not going to like you. So I'm not worried about that part.
Oh, but like the cheating stuff like that, all that stuff was that was all Belichick. And There's also reports from former players of how abusive he was. So he does carry all of that baggage with him, and I'm not taking away from the fact that he did contribute to all those Patriots championships, but we shouldn't just not consider potentially bringing someone else on. I don't have someone else in mind, but we should start shopping around. I really do think so because otherwise we're going to be stuck in this perpetual cycle of being mediocre, neither good nor being really terrible. Because ever since Brady left, I mean, it's going to take a lot to really get back to that level again. And sometimes in order to go back to the top, you need to tear the whole thing down. I'm not saying that is the answer, but it is something that we got to consider.
Maybe, but I still don't think you have to tear everything down, right? Like in the NFL, it just takes 1 or 2 drafts, potentially, or 1 or 2 off seasons to really get to a good state. Case in point, the Cincinnati Bengals.
And also, that's probably also a moot conversation because that's something that Kraft would never do because Kraft
exactly. But I also just want to say, like, look at the Cincinnati Bengals in 2020. They were horrible. Obviously, Joe Burrow was out for the season with an ACL tear. He comes back healthy. They draft Jamar Chase in the first round. They had T. Higgins the year before. They went to the Super Bowl this year, a minute away from winning the Super Bowl. So all it shows you is that, like, yeah, just 1 or 2 good off seasons of drafting, making the right free agency signings. That's all it really takes to really kind of be a contender in the league. And the Patriots are sort of, I wouldn't say that they're completely doomed. Like, I mean, obviously they were a playoff team last year. And at the end of the day, they actually won the same amount of games as the Cincinnati Bengals, who made it to the Super Bowl. They won 10 games. And they only finished a game back behind Buffalo, even though Buffalo is a better team. So it shows you, what it basically shows you is in the NFL, year to year, like you never know what's going to happen. So obviously, yeah, I mean, I still think that this is sort of like, I am a little bit worried about sort of what's going on, but I still think that they should be a playoff team. They're not going to be one of the worst teams in the league at all. They should still beat up on bad teams, but I would be a little bit concerned about sort of the direction that it's heading this offseason, right? You lose Josh McDaniels and you replace him with Joe Judge. Joe Judge failed with the New York Giants, right? He had Daniel Jones, another promising quarterback, and Daniel Jones really regressed badly under Joe Judge. That's kind of concerning, right? If you look at the situation now he has in New England with Mac Jones, another player who had a very promising rookie season.
So
that's kind of what's kind of
in order to get better, you have to see the bottom, and I don't think we've seen the bottom yet.
Look at the Red Sox, right? Did the Red Sox like really have to? I mean, they kind of unintentionally tanked, but I don't think they did that because of that. They tried to like, I mean, look at the Red Sox. I guess the Red Sox aren't the best example because they went last to first, but I don't think that's what the Patriots really want to do. I don't think they want to hit the bottom. I think they're because like you don't need to hit the bottom to be great,
if you
right?
hit the bottom, that's pretty much what I think I've said this before. If you're not,
look at the Jaguars, right? The Jaguars got Trevor Lawrence. They tanked for Trevor Lawrence. What did that even do for them at the end? They still finished
and
with
also
the number
they had
one
a new
pick this year.
coach. They had a new coach, a new quarterback. Did not.
Yeah, I mean, look at the
them.
Jaguars, right? The Jaguars pretty much did what you're suggesting, Rohan.
Rebuilding is a long process. It doesn't happen in just a year or two. It takes several years.
No, but I think what I said earlier is that tanking really only makes sense in the NFL. It like you really like there is no example I've ever seen where you tank with the intention of not picking up some stud quarterback. Like that's never happened. That's never happened. Tank for Tua, suck for luck. No one's ever said like I don't know, like tank for Tomlinson, right? LT, all right. That was never a thing. No one ever tanks for like a great wide receiver. We already have a quarterback. There's like what there's literally no logic for us tanking. Like if we get a good like linebacker, like cool, like that's not gonna make us a contender the same way a stud quarterback will. Like
yeah, I mean, that's what, so I don't really agree with the whole tanking mechanism. I'm more concerned about how they do draft because I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I mean, the 21st pick or whatever pick they have this year in the draft, that should be good enough to get a stud player, regardless of the position.
Probably a cornerback, honestly, because usually the wide receiver.
What about a safety? A safety would also be a good addition too, right? Because McCourty is getting older, so I would.
McCourty's getting older, but I mean, again, like Jalen Mills right now is our number 1 cornerback. So, and I actually am in the camp where I think he's pretty competent, but obviously like, we're looking for.
He's okay as like a third cornerback, but if he's like your best cornerback, then you're in trouble. That's how I look at Jalen Mills. Nice.
No, player, yeah, like I think he's good in our depth chart. He's a good depth cornerback, but I agree with you that like that's why I'm saying I'm guessing our first use is going to be a cornerback. That's why I'm saying that because But we can also get a safety too, right? I mean,
What about a wide receiver? Wouldn't you take a wide receiver potentially first too?
no, I mean, it really depends on the drafting order. I don't actually know how, for example, Andrew Booth is related to the other. First of all, like I don't follow college football. I just like think about what positions we need and look at what the experts are saying about who to come here. That's why I know who Andrew Booth is. I don't watch college football. I would if we're in a scenario where you can either take a really good future cornerback or a really good future wide receiver, I would be in the camp of going for the future cornerback. That's what I would do because the way the market's going these days, like getting experienced good cornerbacks. I was actually just reading about this while you were talking. The reason why we didn't use a franchise tag on JC Jackson was because at his kind of demands, that would basically required paying him like 17 million for a year and then trading him. But the issue there is that whatever team he went to, it would have been very hard for the Patriots. We would have had no leverage in the trade because he would have been like at that point 27 and wanting a long-term big money contract. It would have been very hard to trade him and get really anything but peanuts. And in the meantime, you just paid him 17 million for a season, right? So what I
Oh, but
think
the 17 million would go to that team, right? So you wouldn't have to pay him
no,
anything.
you would well when you franchise tagged him, he was like your contract would be 17 million, but then you have no leverage to trade him because he's already on big money with you guys. It's actually a common thing in soccer. Rohan might know about this. Once you have really high value players, it's really hard to offload them because the only direction's up. They're not going to leave to get paid less money. That's just not how it works. That's how you get stuck with high paid underperforming players. I'm not saying he was underperforming. I'm just saying that's the big risk here. And
That's
there's
why
no way
soccer
we're
has
going to be
that
able to
whole
do that.
secondary transfer market, which is its own thing.
Right, exactly. And we all know there's sometimes tampering that happens there too. I know Arsenal's definitely been a victim of that many times. But anyway, that's what I'm seeing from that regard. I would say that because again, the defense for me is much more of a priority than our offense, like in terms of the wide receivers.
Oh, that makes sense. But yeah, I guess we'll have to see then what happens. But anyways, we've been talking a lot longer about NFL than I anticipated. So yeah, let's talk about the other teams a little bit. Does anyone else want to talk about the Patriots or NFL at all before we move on? Okay, let's talk about the Bruins now a little bit. I mean, nice win against Chicago on Monday. It was 2-1 in overtime, or was it Tuesday? Sorry, Matt Grizzlick
It's a
with the
Tuesday's
game
game.
winner.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
Matt Grizzlick with the game winner right in overtime.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it really shouldn't have been that close because the Bruins, they just massively outshot the Blackhawks. Blackhawks, of course, they're not that great of a team. Of course, they're far off from that dynasty that it really existed in like the early to mid 2010s. But since falling off of that, I mean, they did play a pretty competitive game against Boston. At least not among the skaters though. The only reason they were competitive was one guy, and that was Marc-Andre Fleury. Man, he was just working wonders in that crease, and he was stopping all sorts of shots. I mean, considering the Bruins they made 47. I mean, they had 48 shots, and he saved 46 of them. And one of the saves that Fleury made was a 2-on-1. Eric Holla coming in and he just shut the door right there. And it really just took a massive Bruins onslaught. And I'm surprised that it even took that long, but finally it was Bergeron who connected later on. Pretty much what you would typically expect, and of course that lead didn't really last long because Brandon Hagel, he tied the game later on for the Blackhawks pretty much soon after. And it kind of seems to be a recurring trend. The Bruins are not really able to hold leads. Yes, they did win that game, but it's been generally a concern in the sense that that the week prior they had that game against the Kings where they were leading late, and then the Kings, they pulled the goalie, they scored with the extra attacker, and then the Bruins, they fall in overtime. This, of course, turned out differently. The Bruins, they ended up winning in overtime, but this really shouldn't have been that close against against a team like the Blackhawks. So that was a little bit of a cause for concern, even though a win's a win at the end of the day. But I mean, still a good goal by Grizzlick in OT. And just a side note, congratulations to Nick Foligno because that was his 1,000th game, and it becomes only the second father-son pair to play 1,000+ games in the NHL. The other
yeah,
pair,
yeah,
of
that
course,
is
being
very impressive for
Bobby
sure.
Hull and Brett Hull being the other one, and of course Nick Foligno playing 1,000+ games now. Aside from Mike Foligno, his father, who also played 1,000+ games. But anyway, but on a side note, the Bruins, their win streak did come to an end on Wednesday, though. That really was kind of
Yeah, that was a
it was
bad
kind of
one.
it was kind of a shaky one to
I mean, it
watch,
was
right?
2-2 going into the third
Yeah,
period, right?
yeah,
And then
but
Kirill
yeah,
Kaprizov of Minnesota, he was good, right? 2 goals.
Kirill Kaprizov, I mean, he pretty much he pretty much set the tone early in the game because he got the scoring pretty much early for the Wild, which is usually like not really a thing that the Bruins do. I mean, recently, I mean, earlier on in the season, they had this issue where they wouldn't really start games on time, and then later on they would kind of get their groove later on. But it seemed like, at least during Wednesday's game, it seemed like the first few minutes were a little shaky, and of course that first goal by Kirill Kaprizov was from long range. It was from the point, and it was through several defenders, which shows me that potentially it inadvertently pretty much set up a screen on Jeremy Swayman. And for Swayman, this was like one of the rare, like, not so great games that he had, because he has been playing well, and I've given him a lot of praise. But of the 3 games that the Bruins played this week, or last week, Swayman was in the one against Minnesota, whereas Linus Ullmark, sorry, he was in net for the other two, the 2 games that the Bruins won. And of course, the Bruins, they did show fight. They did come back and end up tying it. And Marchand and Craig Smith, they scored the tying. They scored the 2 goals for Boston. But at the end of the day, I think not having Bergeron probably ended up costing them this game, because he was out with a recurrence of an undisclosed injury, and I think there was a concern that it might become infected. Still don't know quite what that injury is, but he was out against Minnesota, and Bergeron was out again against Minnesota, but against Winnipeg. But at least against Winnipeg, the Bruins were at least able to get the win. But again, that game again, they had a 2-goal lead going into the third, and they blew a 2-goal lead, and those 2 goals pretty much came back to back. And holding leads has not been a strong suit for the Bruins. I don't know if it has something to do with the defense kind of like sitting back, or just taking their foot off the gas, or I don't know. It has to be a combination of the two, or if it's the offense going onto high gear for the other for our opponents. Whatever it is, that is something that Bruce Cassidy has to figure out, and he has to. There has to be a better way to address those late game situations where they got to lead and they got to defend it, because if you keep your opponents in it for too long, they are going to find a way to come back. And you never want to roll the dice, take it to overtime and roll the dice over there, because that's never a good position to be in. But it was good to see that the Bruins were able to untie that game late in the third period, and of course, adding that 4th goal late definitely helped. So overall, not a bad week for the Bruins. Two wins, 1 loss. The 1 loss was kind of bad, but the 2 wins both involved instances where they couldn't keep a lead, and one of them had to come in overtime against, I would say, probably like a bad team like Chicago. And yeah, record-wise, 2-1 seems good, but I see a lot of trouble moving ahead for the Bruins. I think there's some mechanics that they got to fix.
Will they even be able to fix that at this point? Like, they kind of are what they are at this point, right?
I mean, they are what they are, but I think the goaltending situation hasn't been bad, but because a lot of those goals do come on
defense hasn't been that good.
Defensive breakdowns, which is kind of unusual, because the Bruins, they kind of pride themselves on being this defense first team, and I'm not really I'm kind of seeing a break from that defense first mentality this year. Yeah, it's been holding up, but I'm not quite sure how much longer this is gonna keep on, that the Bruins are going to be able to keep this up. So I'm not quite sure if either of you have the same kind of concerns that I do about the Bruins, but record-wise, they're still doing fine. So it's still, as it stands right now, things still appear good. So I'm just curious what your take on this is. Either one of you go.
Yeah, I guess I think you probably gave a really nice summary there, Rohan, of the current situation. And yeah, I think again it is an interesting case because I think Swayman's definitely who we want as our keeper for the future. So I think it's always good, of course, to be kind of charitable and understand that they will have like a few games here and there where they make mistakes, and that's how keepers grow. And of course with keepers, right, it's just so much scrutiny, because when you make a mistake, it's it's a goal, right? That's how
Yeah.
it works. So very different level of pressure than maybe another position player where you can make a mistake doesn't always lead to that. But again, we'll see. We're entering the playoffs. Um, Still kind of far away, but close enough to start thinking about it. And yeah,
They made their way
I
up in the
don't
division. They've overtaken the Caps, which is pretty big.
exactly. Yeah. So I mean, at this point, I think, like I've said earlier, at this point is not really will we make the playoffs. It's like, what do we want to do once we actually get there, right? Um, and I guess I don't really have any obvious answers for Bruce Cassidy's team. But I guess really finding a way to keep the team kind of really disciplined, and especially kind of late in the game when they're holding on to leads, or kind of trying to manage the game, being kind of patient with it, and kind of trying to play consistently strong the whole time, not just like coming out kind of quietly in the first part, then really hard in the second, just trying to keep a good consistent level of performance.
Think it's going to be so interesting because the three games they got next week: Monday against Montreal, Thursday against Tampa, and then Saturday against the Islanders. The big one is obviously going to be Thursday against Tampa because they're second in the division, and the Bruins are they're right behind them, and so that's going to be a crucial divisional clash. So that game against Tampa on Thursday is going to be a big one. But Monday against a team like Montreal, yeah, Montreal's dead last. Like the Bruins better they got to go out and not just like win, but they got to just like dominate and absolutely beat up on them because you got to take care of business against bad teams. There's like anything short of that is just unacceptable at this point. Literally 16, 36 and 9, 41 points, dead last in the league. It's not, yeah, they were pretty much contending with Arizona and Seattle Kraken for near last, but we saw the week prior, right? We saw the week before that against Arizona. Yeah, the Bruins came out with a win, but they just barely squeaked one out.
Seattle, didn't they beat the Kraken
Seattle,
in overtime?
They beat the Kraken, but even that they barely had to squeak one out. So they're not. Yeah, I guess you could say they're taking care of business against bad teams, but I like that's I want to see them beat up on bad teams, right? Because you got to show that's how you show how good you are, right? And if they can only squeak one out against the bad teams, it doesn't really assure me against when you're taking on like a Tampa or potentially in the future like a Florida or even or God forbid Carolina. So like, and of course Saturday against the Islanders, of course they're the team that bounced us last season. That game's up that game's a week from today, so that's gonna be an interesting one to watch. Although the Islanders, they're not as good this year. They're 23rd in the league overall, 59 points, 25, 24, and 9. But yeah, since they are the team that did bounce us last year, it's gonna be interesting to see how the Bruins do respond to that. But I guess the thing that does kind of surprise me is though Montreal dead last, especially after making the Stanley Cup final last year. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this before. Like this kind of a collapse in one season. It's really something. I don't know. I don't know if you have anything to add to that one over there, but I don't know if you've seen anything like that, making the final and then being dead last the following year.
Remember the Red Sox in 2013? Different sport, but 2014 they were last.
Yeah,
So I mean,
that is
it
true.
happens.
That is true. Yeah, it does happen.
What about the
But,
Cavaliers after LeBron left in 2018? Like they made it to the finals in 2018, got swept by Golden State. LeBron leaves. I don't know if they were dead last, but they finished pretty badly. They missed the playoffs. So I've seen it before.
So yeah, it is a shocking turn of events. But hey, like head up there to Montreal and take care of business because it is the first game in Montreal, first game at Bell Center since the pandemic began because I think after the loosening the border restrictions. So of course the Bruins are in Canada right now since they just took on the Jets in Winnipeg last night. So they're probably staying in Canada, just headed over to Montreal. But anyway, it's good to see that the Bruins are kind of positioning themselves for the playoffs moving forward, and we're gonna have to see as on your bun, as you mentioned. I think at this point it's more about where the Bruins going to be once the playoffs start, and how do we really want to position ourselves when those playoffs do start. Because I think making the playoffs is less of a concern. Although the Bruins should not take their foot off the gas during the regular season. I've seen that movie too many times. 2015 being one of them. When losing to Tampa late in the season, that was pretty ugly to watch. But making the playoffs, if you just squeak by and make it in the playoffs, anything can happen at that point because the Stanley Cup playoffs are basically like the second season after that. So that's going to be interesting to watch. And hey, like whenever playoff hockey is near, that spring is near, baseball's about to begin. So and basketball season's heating up. So this is a great time for sports.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to really quickly ask you, Rohan, this is a slight tangent still on the Bruins. What do you recently think about the Bruins' latest signings of Mark McLaughlin and Michael Callahan? You know, they're both actually natives of Massachusetts. And I was reading a nice article from Hannah Garfield, and she was basically writing about how the Bruins have really added a lot of kind of homegrown talent to their rosters in the last kind of few years. And if we look at our main team, like it's like Charlie Coyle, Matt Gerslick, I guess. I don't want to mispronounce it, but
Yep.
they're also both from Massachusetts, of course. I was just wondering, what do you think about kind of the ability to really have a pipeline like the way
Think
the
the
Bruins
pipeline
do?
is important. Of course,
Yeah,
of course, I don't know enough about those two specific players to really comment intelligently about either one. But what I can say on a macro level is that this is an aging core. I mean, Bergeron is not young. He's definitely like nearing the end of his career. I think he's probably got a few years left. Marchand isn't really young either. And overall, this is just an old team. And especially to cultivate new talent, you're gonna need that pipeline, as you mentioned. And what better way to do it than to do it locally? Obviously, I get it. Like people move around, they move around from team to team. They'll study in one part of the country, they'll go and play in another part of the country, and players move around. I get it, right? But it's always nice to have a Massachusetts native in there, and we'll see how this ends up working out for the Bruins in the future. But I have been saying for a while that the Bruins they need to find a way to scout for younger talent, and I think and I'm just hoping that this is one of the ways that they go about doing that.
that's really nice. Yeah, I agree with you. I think one of the nice things about this is it kind of like reminds me a bit, not quite, but of kind of like the youth system in professional soccer, just in the idea of how it can really kind of like keep tabs on people in your community, and then when they start playing for you, I think there's an added kind of, I think it adds to the team chemistry in really unique ways because these people have grown up watching like the Bruins on TV, presumably, probably grew up really hardcore fans, I'm guessing, and it's kind of nice to, it's kind of, I feel like I just kind of get the feeling that it adds a lot of meaning behind the jersey for these players. So I'm really excited for their opportunities, and
But
I hope they
at
have
the
a
end of
great
the day, they're all
experience.
professionals, and they're all going to play well no matter where they end up going.
Oh yeah, no, they will. But I mean, I'm just speculating. I would
Yeah.
guess it's there's always a special feeling to represent the team that from a childhood that you're a fan of, right?
Well, yeah, and it's also another thing to play against the team that you grew up cheering for. Paul Pierce being a
The other
prime
thing,
example of
yeah.
that. He
So
was a
it
Lakers
comes
fan when
from
he was growing up. So
both
yeah,
directions. Yeah.
yeah,
So I just wanted to point that out.
yeah, it's definitely going to be definitely something to watch for in the future. But anyway, that's my take on the Bruins. I don't know if Martha, if you have anything to add over there.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be kind of interesting because I'm going to take Rohan's, I'm going to steal your rebuilding take for the Bruins, for the Patriots, and kind of apply to the Bruins here
Uh,
because
Tear it
what
down.
they've
You say tear it
sort
all
of,
down.
I wouldn't say tear it all down because, I mean, obviously McAvoy, you have a promising keeper or goalie in Swayman and some other nice players for sure. But I just don't know. Like, I feel like every year the Bruins kind of play this game with us where they sort of tease us with a promising regular season, and then in the playoffs something will happen. Since 2011 this is sort of what's happened, right? And obviously, yeah, I'll give them a pass for 2013 against Chicago, and 2019 sure they made it to the final and lost in game 7. So yeah, those 2 years maybe I'll give them a little bit of a pass. But every year we sort of see this game with the Bruins, they play with us, they sort of, and like I think at some point you have to kind of wonder, like, what's the point of keeping this core together of Marchand, Bergeron? For a while there was Tuukka Rask. I mean, obviously he's retired now, but like a lot of the core members, like, what have they really won to justify sort of keeping it back every year and running it back with this group, right?
They're
Like,
the only, I
they
mean,
really
they're the
haven't
only two
won
people left from
much.
that 2011 championship team.
But like every year, like this is like a core, and then it just isn't enough. I think. Like I don't know. Like
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of this team in Green Bay that has had this quarterback who won a long time ago,
yeah. I
and
mean, it's actually
you know,
not like a bad parallel to make with the Packers because the Bruins and Packers both have a way of like sort of getting you into the team and then they'll let you down in the playoffs. Like usually that's sort of how they work. But I kind of wonder with the Bruins, right? Like Bergeron. I mean, for a while, Daniel Chara was there for all these years until he left last year for Washington. So like
A couple years, end of 2020. Yeah. So yeah,
it's like I guess yeah,
yeah,
last year, right? I
yeah.
guess technically 2020, 2021.
And then he went to the Capitals, and now I believe he's on the Islanders.
Yeah, but like the point is, like I feel for the Bruins, right? Like I mean, again, like
So I guess we're gonna see him this Saturday. The Bruins are gonna see him again.
yeah. But my point is, like I feel like for the Bruins, right? Like it's a very kind of like if you're really kind of squeaking by these bad teams, like I don't know if they've really shown me enough that they can really take on Tampa, and they definitely cannot take on Carolina the way Carolina has handled them in the regular season. So I don't know. Like I think the ceiling for this team, really, honestly, is probably like second round. Maybe they get some team in the first round who they are able to kind of beat up on. But I mean, really, I could see this team like losing, going one and done in the playoffs.
The only way I see the Bruins going far is that they're up against a not so great team in the first round. They get by, and then somehow
like 2019, basically what happened in 2019, right?
And then miraculously somehow Carolina or Tampa they get upset in the first round or something.
Do you remember what happened in
that.
2019 when it was Washington and Tampa, right? Both lost in the first round. So then the Bruins had to play Columbus and Carolina, who at that time wasn't very good, and they beat both of them to get to the Stanley Cup final. That was basically like a gifted like path to a championship potentially, because you faced St. Louis, who was a good team, but they could have beaten St. Louis totally. So that's sort of how I'm sort of looking at the Bruins, right? Like it's kind of like disappointing. Like obviously, yeah, a nice win against the Jets yesterday. Charlie Coyle was terrific, and it was good to see Marchand get involved again, as well as Taylor Hall.
Marchand and Marchand, their time will come to retire, and it's gonna be whenever they do retire. I mean, they're already getting older, but I think they're probably going to want to retire with the Bruins.
I forgot about him. Pastrnak has been good.
Pastrnak is the future of the team. Like he is the future of the team.
Like I feel like the thing with the Bruins is just like I don't know if they're ever going to like potentially add to the core. That's sort of my issue with this team. Like because I don't think this.
You got to build a new core. You got to build a new core.
It's not good enough.
I mean, but that at the same time, I'm hesitant to say get rid of the old core. I think we should just phase them out.
Eventually, not get rid of them, but can't you at least like sort of like I mean, can't you start adding some players and gradually trying to transition
some players? Maybe even add them to the first line. Maybe have them play in the Bergeron Marchand line. Give them more playing time alongside them in that first line. Experiment with different players on the first line. So that first line can definitely become flexible and They could even toy around with the idea of moving Bergeron and Marchand to the second line or even the third line. So anything's a possibility at this point. But I think those two are still on their own playing pretty well. So
they're good. But it's like they tease you every year, right? Don't they tease you every year? Don't you always think that they're going to be really good?
But the thing is that before pulling the trigger and making that decision, you got to know that you have a good replacement on hand, and I don't think the Bruins have that at this point.
All right, let's play an interesting game. Who's going to be the first coach to go, either retire or just go? Bruce Cassidy or Bill Belichick?
I think it's going to be Bruce Cassidy, but not for merit reasons. I think it's because Bill Belichick is not going anywhere because he's buddy with Kraft.
Interesting.
So I think at the end of the day, nepotism is what's going to rescue him.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Does anyone else want to discuss the Bruins at all? I guess that's sort of my take. I'm just very kind of wary of the Bruins at this point. They sort of tease me every year, and then they find a way to break my heart still. So I'm always kind of just cautiously kind of observing the Bruins and sort of seeing maybe this year is different, but every year basically it's been sort of disappointment after disappointment. So it's hard for me to really be overly optimistic about them just after what I've seen.
Yeah, in a 32-team league, guess what? 31 out of those 32 teams are not going to win a championship.
Yeah, but it's not about that. Don't they tease you every year? Don't you think that it's going to be different?
So by that logic, 31 out of the 32 teams should all get rid of their coaches every single year.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why they do get rid of their coaches after 4 or 5 years of not being successful, right? If you're not successful, that's a different thing. Like, if you make the playoffs every year and you're not able to win, then you have to kind of look at some point and see what's actually going on, right? Is it all the players? Like, look at the Celtics, right? They had Brad Stevens for 8 years. They made a change to Ime Udoka. I mean, they're looking really good right now, right?
Well, that suggests they need tinkering, not fundamental change, because if you do fundamental change, then you very likely won't be able to make the playoffs at all. Yes, there are some miracles where you go like worst to first or something, but unless you have a proper succession plan in place, there's a very real
look at
risk
the Red Sox, right? They transitioned
cliff.
from John Farrell after like 3-4 years of kind of disappointing runs after the World Series, and then the first year with Alex Cora won a World Series.
At the time, and at the time I was actually against that move, but in retrospect, bringing on Alex Cora was a great move.
So yeah, I mean that's the thing, sort of like with these moves, right? I think Bruce Cassidy is a good coach, but
like, I was against getting rid of Terry Francona. I was against getting rid of John Farrell, but turnover happens. Coaches come, coaches go, and only time will tell whether it ends up being the right decision or not. I think right now it's probably fair to say that bringing on Alex Cora was the right decision. And also, I think the Red Sox tend to have a lot of luck early on in coach's tenure. Frank Kona, Red Sox win in their first year. John Farrell, Red Sox win in 13. Was that Farrell's first year or was it his second year?
First.
I believe it was first year. And then Cora, he comes in 2018. Cora's first year, the Red Sox win it all. So yeah, amidst all that span, there is I guess bringing on new coaches generally works well for the Red Sox. There is one glaring exception to that, though. I think we all know which one that is. Yeah, yep. But barring that kind of situation, I guess it's worked out for the Red Sox. And
I mean, it's not going to always work.
What about Grady
right?
Little?
Yeah.
Grady Little, oh man.
Yeah. I do remember Grady Little keeping Pedro in the game for so long.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they should fire Bruce Cassidy, but I do kind of wonder after a while, like if they keep on sort of having disappointment after disappointment in the playoffs, at some point something has to give, right? The Bruins have to sort of look and see, why are we continuing to fall short when we have a talented team? That's the point, right? It's not that you should be winning every year, but I mean, if consistently you're sort of losing to the same teams like Tampa, right? 18-20, they lose to Tampa. So then you kind of wonder, what do they have that we don't? And is it a coaching issue? Is it that they're more talented than us? Is it both? That's sometimes what it is. But sometimes it might be we're as talented.
In a few short words, they have Kucherov, and they have Vasilevsky, and they have Victor Hedman. That's basically the Tampa core.
Yeah, but how did they lose to Columbus then in 2019? Get swept? How did that happen then?
That's true. Yeah. But
they lost to Washington in 2018, right?
But at the end of the day, sports is any sporting event is a random outcome. Yes, better teams have a better chance of winning. That doesn't mean that they will win all the time. Bad teams are less likely to win. That doesn't mean they're not that they're going to lose every time. Random events do occur, and that's just a part of sports.
Yeah, and that's fine. I'm not disputing that at all. But I mean, I'm just saying the Bruins. Don't you think the Bruins should have more than one Stanley Cup by now?
They should.
You agree with me that they've underachieved?
Oh yeah. I mean, given the quality of this team, they've definitely underachieved.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. At some point, do you blame the coach? They already moved on from Claude Julien, right? So you can't use him as a scapegoat anymore because you've had Bruce Cassidy for 5 years now, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, why is it that under Bruce Cassidy, they've had him for 5 years and they've done well? They made the playoffs every year. But why is it that they're consistently falling short?
And they made the finals every single year, and they made one final.
The playoffs every single year.
They made the playoffs every single year, and they made one final.
Don't you think they should have beaten St. Louis in 2019?
Which I think they should have, but overall, that's not a bad record for a coach. That's really not a bad record.
It isn't, but at some point, I mean, I'm not saying you get rid of Bruce Cassidy now, but I mean, if it happens again,
and I don't think that meets the threshold for getting rid of a coach.
Well, okay, so if the Bruins lose in the first round this year, and next year they again lose in the first round, don't you think that's kind of a merit then for moving on?
If they have a proper replacement, yes, but I don't believe in getting rid of people just for the sake of getting rid of people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the Bruins head coaching candidates at this point, so I don't know, but I mean, I'm sure there's someone available who they can go to at some point if it comes to that. But anyways, yeah, that's sort of going to be the Bruins segment we have today. Roland, did you want to add anything else? Or
let's head to the court.
Yeah, let's talk about the Celtics now. I mean, talk about a team that made the change at coach, and now it's paying off big time. I mean, big win against the Warriors. Obviously, Steph Curry only played 14 minutes because he left due to an injury, only scored 3 points. Klay Thompson did score 18 points, but the Celtics beat him 110-88, and Tatum and Brown, each of them with 26 points. So, yeah, I mean, I thought it was a terrific game overall. And Marcus Smart with 20 points. I mean, the Celtics have just been rolling recently. Yesterday against Sacramento, 126-97, absolutely crushed the Kings. And it was actually encouraging because the Kings actually made it close. It was 84-75. They had cut it to single digits.
Yeah, they went on a 9-0 run.
Yeah, but the Celtics just completely never panicked.
But
early on, they probably would have.
But it's still pretty fair to say that the Celtics did absolutely beat up on the Kings.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is a team, you talk about what the Bruins should be doing. The Celtics are pretty much doing that, beating up on bad teams. And they're also beating up on good teams at this point now, too. They're pretty much just beating up on most teams. Obviously, they lost to Dallas last Sunday.
They have the best record in 2022. That says something.
No, they've been outstanding. At this point, I think they're a real contender for a championship. because who knows what happens with Brooklyn's situation with Kyrie Irving. Ben Simmons hasn't even played for them yet, so I have no idea how much of an impact he'll make in 2022 for the Nets. So, I mean, and I think the East isn't entirely open. I think the West is like, I mean, they can really beat anyone from the West too if it comes to that. So I think Celtics, like the door is wide open for a championship run this year. So, I mean, that's sort of my take. I mean, obviously, just a
they're definitely
league.
they're definitely good enough to win it all. But like you said, just like the Bruins have done, and like the Patriots are kind of doing right now, the Celtics, they kind of flirt with you. They get you excited, and then they
the Patriots, to be fair, for a long time flirted with you and actually delivered, right?
Well, there was that 10-year span between Super Bowl 39 and Super Bowl 49.
Yeah, those were tough.
So I mean that kind of felt like a drought, even though they were perpetually good. So yeah, so by your logic, right? By your logic, between 39 and 49, those Super Bowls, the Patriots were pretty good. They were making the playoffs, but they weren't winning at all. So by the same logic they used on Bruce Cassidy, the Patriots should have gotten rid of Bill Belichick right then
because
and there.
Bruce Cassidy has not won a championship. Bill Belichick still had 3 Super Bowls at that span. So that's not the same equivalent thing to say.
Yes, but that was a long time not delivering championships.
Yeah. But what is Bruce Cassidy's track record as a coach? Has he ever won anything as a coach?
So by that, so basically by that logic, the Bruins probably should have never gotten rid of Claude Julien then, because the 2011 championship was under Claude Julien.
Yeah, maybe they shouldn't have then, right? Like, I mean, really, like, what did
for all you know,
Claude Julien went to 2 Stanley Cups, right? So, I mean, I don't entirely remember Claude too well, but
I mean, the Bruins could bring back Claude Julien, because after that he went to the after the Bruins fired him, he went to the Canadiens, and then the Canadiens fired him. So yeah, the Bruins can bring him back.
I feel it's different to compare. I mean, that is a valid thing to say, like Belichick, but the thing with Belichick is he actually won 3 Super Bowls before that drought happened, whereas Cassidy hasn't won anything at all, right? So it's a little bit of a different thing when you say, like, yeah, you could say, like,
yeah, particularly in sports, you can't really rest on your laurels. It's never about what did you do for me. It's what can you do for me.
I mean, clearly it was the right decision to keep Belichick, right? After that, so
in retrospect, that was the right decision. In retrospect, some things turn out to not be a great decision. So these things can go
I think it's
way.
also just sort of like, it's not just like a playoff disappointment. Like Belichick, at least in that span, they reached 2 Super Bowls. Cassidy did reach 1 Stanley Cup final, but Belichick in that span of the 10 years did.
Yeah, he reached 2 Super Bowls and they reached the AFC Championship in nearly every year. But there were a lot of disappointing AFC Championships in that span.
Yeah, but how many times have the Bruins reached a conference final besides 2019?
Well,
how many times have they even reached a conference final?
That's true.
Aside from 2019,
it's usually either crash out in the first round.
Let's go by, right? 2017, lose to Ottawa, right?
Somehow make it to the second round and then get.
By the way, we're talking about the Celtics now. I don't know how we ended up. We're talking about Belichick and Cassidy. Yeah, I don't know. We're like crossing sports now. Like, let's talk about the Celtics now. Let's actually, especially.
That's okay. That's okay. That's the nature of the show.
Yeah. We were talking about the Celtics, and somehow we've talked about Bill Belichick and Bruce Cassidy.
But for the Celtics, though, I mean, bring Ime Udoka on. That was, I mean, right now it seems like a great decision. Time will tell whether it does turn out to.
I mean, Tatum just seems locked in now. Like the way he's completely bought in, and just the way he's sort of able to take over games now. Like it's really awesome to see, because this is really the Jason Tatum I was hoping to see at some point, because this Jason Tatum is
he looks superstar caliber
in the league. Yeah, I mean, at this point, he's a top 5 player in the league if he keeps playing like this, right?
Because I think if he has several seasons like this, like the way he's playing right now, in terms of his legacy, he might eventually give LeBron James, Steph Curry a run for their money.
I don't know about that. That's like a very optimistic thing.
We can hope, right?
Like I said, that is if he's like if you
no,
take
like
how
I mean,
hot
I
he is
think
right
he's
now,
a great player.
And if he continues to stay that hot for several seasons, obviously very unlikely, because it's extremely hard to do. But
probably like 10 years, honestly.
But hey, if he does.
But if he does, yeah, no, I'm hoping, Ron. I'm hoping.
I mean, do you see the Celtics team like potentially reaching the NBA Finals now?
I think it's not. I mean, it's. I don't think it's that far fetched to say that.
I mean, I'll keep saying this all season until the playoffs happen.
In fact, I would even say it's potentially likely. I'm willing to go on a limb and say it's likely, actually.
I mean, I'm just going to keep saying this over and over again every week. The only team I will accept a loss to in the Eastern Conference is the Brooklyn Nets. If the Celtics lose to the Brooklyn Nets with Kevin Durant just being Kevin Durant, then you can't do anything about that. So that one I'll accept. Milwaukee, I think they can beat Milwaukee. I think they can beat Philadelphia. I think they can beat Miami. I think they can beat Chicago. I think they can beat Cleveland. They can beat anyone else in the East, and I would pick them to beat them. And if they don't beat them, then I will be disappointed. If you lose to Brooklyn, I think you can beat Brooklyn, but sure, okay, that's the one I'll accept.
But next week's going to be a good test though, because they're playing against two similar caliber teams. I mean, they're playing against the Nuggets on like tomorrow. They're fifth in the West, and on Wednesday they're playing against the Jazz. They're fourth in the West, and sandwiched in between those games is against OKC on Monday, and they should absolutely beat up on OKC since they're 14th in the West. That they should just take care of business right away. But the game on Sunday and the game on Wednesday, I think those are going to be interesting.
Tomorrow's like a Sunday night game too, right? So that's going to be interesting.
I believe so.
Yeah, that will be an interesting one for sure. I mean, it's good because, I mean, I think it's always good to play these teams because they've been beating up on good teams too in the span. Like they beat Brooklyn with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. So that was a terrific win. And like, I mean, overall, Tatum is just playing awesome right now. Jaylen Brown, it's great to see him getting involved, like against Sacramento. Brown had 30 points and Tatum had 32. The reason that's important is because in the playoffs, you can't always expect Tatum to just be able to score 50 points, right? That's not sustainable. But you can expect him to probably get 25 to 30 points. And if Brown is able to get you another 25 to 30 points, that's like 60 points between your top two players. That's going to help you a lot in the playoffs against these types of games where basically if Tatum is ever having a down game, Brown steps up, or Marcus Smart at least has that one game where he shoots lights out from three. That's the type of performance we need to see from the Celtics. So I am excited about the Celtics team now. Like, I mean, early on it was definitely a struggle, but now it's really awesome, like how they've sort of just flipped the switch. And I think in the playoffs they can definitely make some noise. So I am excited about that for sure. So we'll see. I mean, the Celtics have been outstanding, and I mean, we'll see big game against Denver tomorrow night in Denver. So let's now just talk at the very end about the Red Sox a little bit, or like baseball in general. Obviously, lockout is over.
Spring training began. The first two games are in. The Red Sox won them both, and Bobby D homered in each of them.
Yeah, I mean, Bobby Dahlbeck is pretty good. Like, it does sort of bring me some questions, right? Because Kyle Schwarber is now with the Phillies, and Freddie Freeman, he was another Red Sox target at first base. He signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and Carlos Correa signed with the Minnesota Twins. So a lot of these kind of potential Red Sox targets are now off the board, right? They're on different teams. So Trevor Story is
Carlos Correa going to the Twins, that definitely helps because that means the Astros aren't as good anymore.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Trevor Story, though, that's a very interesting name because he can really hit well.
The Twins are going to be better, but who knows by how much?
I mean, Minnesota, that's a pretty good roster too, right? So I wouldn't count them out at all. I mean, just because, like, I mean, if they get better and the Astros get worse, couldn't the Twins give the Red Sox more trouble next year then potentially?
They could.
My expectation for the Red Sox is I think they have enough talent to make the playoffs. I don't buy the Yankees that much. I don't think the Yankees are even better than the Red Sox, right? Like, what have the Yankees really done in this offseason to really make? I mean, they did make that one trade, but I mean, I don't really think that they're that much better than the Red Sox.
They're also just like an old team. A lot of their core is getting old.
Kind of remind me a lot about the Bruins and Celtics, right? Like that team, they'll sort of tease you, and then they'll find a way to let you down. Like, it's sort of a very interesting trend some of these teams have. Like, every year they're sort of running back with the same core and group, even though they continuously fall short. So,
well, I mean, there are a lot of teams. In fact, precisely in baseball, that's going to be 11 teams because 12 make the playoffs and 11 of them don't win the World Series. And that's another thing, right? 12 teams in the in the playoffs this time. I'm just curious how you feel about the new playoff format.
No, I mean, I like it. I think it's more interesting.
I like having 12 teams in the playoffs. Although I am kind of curious what the new wild card is going to be like. Is it still a one-off the same way it was like in previous years, or is it?
Yeah, that I'm not sure about. But I mean, I guess if it's 12 teams total, that means 6 per AL division, right?
6 per league, right?
Yeah.
So I guess like each of the division winners are going to be like 3, and then
there's 3 divisions, right?
So
there's 3 wild cards.
So are there 3 wild cards then? So then are they going to be seeded 1 through 6 accordingly? And then who gets a bye, who doesn't get a bye? I still
makes sense to me. Like 1 plays 6, 2 plays 5, 3 plays 4. That would make sense to me how it works.
Giving a bye makes sense, or giving the top team giving the 1 seed a bye, and then the 2 seed should be not be given a bye, but they should be given the privilege of of being able to pick their opponent. That's how the system would work if it were left to be.
I mean, there is kind of something like that because I think depending on how the wild card format worked, the team would kind of prefer, like, it would give a preference of which team it wanted to face in the playoffs. Actually, the Yankees last year chose to play the Red Sox. They wanted to play the Red Sox in
Oh,
Boston, and I guess that worked out great for the Red Sox. So
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think the Red Sox should be a playoff team again next year. They should be in the mix, and we'll see what
Yeah,
happens from there, right?
but last year was just crazy though. Like I really didn't expect the Red Sox to even make the playoffs, let alone make it to the ALCS. I don't know if like repeating that is going to be hard. But then again, bringing when you have Cora, good
Cora
things
is a very
generally do tend to happen.
creative player. Like I mean, he's a very creative manager, and he was also a
Last
very
year he
good
was back.
player.
I mean, obviously coming back from suspension last year, he was able to he did manage to do a lot with the Red Sox. Like during that time, the only season where the Red Sox kind of underachieved with him was 2019. With Cora, but overall, Cora's tenure has been pretty good.
No, definitely. But yeah, I mean, Anirban, do you want to talk at all about the Red Sox?
I don't have much to add. I just want to say I'm kind of excited about some of the prospects, some of the younger players we have entering our pipeline again this season. I know like Alex Spinellas was actually, I think, in the MLB pipeline's top 100. And I think he might actually be an interesting option later in the season as kind of a power hitter for us based on kind of what we've seen from him in the lower leagues. And now that we lost Hunter Renfroe, for example. So yeah, I'm kind of excited again to see prospects and kind of younger players and rookies kind of get their chance with us and in the league.
Sounds good. Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to be this episode. We'll be back next week again to recap the week in sports news. I'm sure there'll be a lot to come up. But until then, everyone, enjoy the week.
And then another special edition before the baseball season starts.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah,
we're gonna have a full preview of the Red Sox season and also the MLB season overall. So that's gonna be fun to do.
Yep. Well, that will be it for us for this week. We'll be back next week. Until then, enjoy the weekend, everyone, and just enjoy all the sports games that are going on.
Peace.